What is the craziest butterfly effect in your life? I was on a dating site for a few years from 2012 to 2015, only meeting douchebags. I decided around early December 2015 that I would delete that site around New Year's Eve if nothing better came along and just be single for the rest of my life. At the 30th of December I got the norovirus from my niece and got super sick for like a week. It was horrible. However, it also meant that I didn't delete my profile. Around the 5th of January a guy messaged me, and today we are engaged to be married and has been together for 5 years. I'm very grateful. This happened back in the late 90s. Grew up in California. I was a giant computer nerd. Got accepted to a college in another state. Right before leaving I went to a local hacker computer meetup and met this guy that was hilarious and crazy smart. Caught his name, but never got his contact info and didn't think much of it because I was leaving town soon anyway. About a year later I was 1,000 miles away messing around on Nike and got an alert that someone was port scanning my computer. I was able to look up the IP address and see who in the channel it was, and I called the guy out. After going back and forth for a minute I realize he is from my town in California, so I asked him if he knows the guy I met a year ago, and he replied that he was literally at his house right then. He hopped on chat and he remembered me. We made plans to get together when I was home next on break. About 6 months after that he got a coding job in LA at a movie studio and got me an interview there. I got the job, dropped out of college, and 20+ years later I've had a great career that I would never have had without that random ass chat encounter. I wasn't supposed to be in band in 7th grade because I wasn't good enough. They accidentally put it on my schedule. The teacher allowed me to stay as long as I practiced, and now I'm a university music professor. My little brother invited me to a D&D game. The DM was a guy I knew from high school, BFFs with our cousin, and at our house often enough for games nights with the guys. I almost didn't go, but I'm so glad I did. My brother dropped out not long after, but I'm now great friends with that group. We play games weekly, several campaigns running simultaneously that rotate Saturdays, plus online board games on weeknights. It has kept all of us sane during COVID, and I've built friendships that I can tell will last the rest of my life. I'm very grateful to have them in my life. In college my junior year, I was heading to the library to study for an upcoming exam, but halfway there realized I had forgotten my notes and quickly returned to my room to retrieve them. On the way back to the library, I ran into an acquaintance who invited me to a party and I uncharacteristically decided to go. Well, at that party, I met this very pretty girl. 2 years later we married. 40 years later we have 3 adult kids and 5 grandchildren. Crazy to think what would have been had I not forgotten those notes. One day in 3rd grade my teacher didn't show up, so they split my class up into different classrooms throughout the school. I was placed into a 1st grade class. My now wife was in that class and we both remember the day vividly. I was in a shitty relationship with no future and wasted a year of my life. I never had Fridays off, and I got called off work, and I was really depressed about the breakup. My friends persuaded me to go out, so I made myself up and went to a quiz night downtown with no intention of meeting or really wanting to socialize. We were short in our team, so got paired up with some others and got talking to a guy and we became friends and eventually dating over a year now. He's complete opposite and treats me like gold and wants a future. If I hadn't been called off work I wouldn't have been at that quiz night. Not really a huge butterfly effect, but it has changed my life for the better. In 2016, I sat next to a guy on a plane that was in the military at the time. We talked the whole way to our destination. He originally was from a hometown, but he was only on a visit, and he was stationed at our destination. At the end of the flight, we decided to exchange Instagrams. We barely talked, but we always liked each other's pictures. Then in the summer of 2019 I started seeing him post with location tags of our hometown. We ended up meeting up and becoming close friends. The timing though never worked out for us to be in a relationship. but if anything, he is an amazing friend. When my mom was pregnant, before me she went grocery shopping. On a whim, she decided to buy a heavy bag of potatoes. She carried them home, which strained something internally. She miscarried that pregnancy that afternoon. She always wanted one more child, so she conceived again. With me. Therefore, my entire life, and those of my kids depended on my mom's potato craving. 58 years ago. Edit for the doubters here. My mom was a medical doctor, as was my dad, and their obgyn. So, 3 doctors agreed on this cause. I think they examined the miscarried fetus for abnormalities as a cause, and found nothing unusual. Could it have been inevitable? Maybe. Miscarriages from carrying stuff seem to be rare, but these 3 doctors agreed on the circumstances. My cousins came out to visit me in the PNW when I was doing my grad work at Iowa. We decided to go camping in the Olympics. It just so happened to be a free weekend at national parks, so all the campgrounds were full. We decided to ask a couple of harmless looking lads if we could share their site with the caveat that we could leave if any of us felt sketched out. They turned out to be really nice guys. We had a great time and I stayed in touch with them when we got back to the city. The following spring they invited me to join their indoor ex-soccer team. In sort of a freak accident, I broke my leg during the 3rd game I played. I tripped going onto the field and my teammate slammed the steel door on my leg. I needed help getting around. I couldn't drive or bathe myself, so I moved home to Illinois so my parents could help me. I had to turn down what I thought was my dream job in Seattle because of the bummed leg. I had a hard time finding work when I healed up and got back out west. So I ended up moving down to Portland to work on a farm with underserved youth. Fell in love with farming. Moved twice more across the country to follow the farm seasons, ultimately ending up back in Illinois. I was thankfully just a couple hours away when I got a call that my father was suddenly very sick. Rushed home and got to see him before he passed. Stayed in town to support my mom and connected with an old friend. The old friend and I will celebrate 6 years of marriage and our daughter's 2nd birthday next month. A 30-year-old guy talked me into going to his house with him after church when I was 15. I just stood by the door in his front entry. I didn't want to go in. He came and put his arms around me and pulled me upstairs. My life would have been totally different if he would have just taken me home. A simple choice, which ruined my life so long ago. And now it's ruined his too, since he's been arrested. During the 2007 financial crash, a friend made an idle comment, "You're a really good teacher. There's a language school at the Chamber of Commerce if you are looking for work." 14 years later, I'm still working for them, teaching hundreds of hours per year. And I've also become a translator, interpreter, and tourist guide. Thank you, Edith. There were these 2 sisters in Budapest whose school was doing an international school event where other students would come over and stay at their place for a few days. The younger sister looked at the list of available students and picked one who had a nice girlish name, thinking that maybe they'll become friends or something. The girl student turned out to be a boy. The younger sister didn't realize that the foreign name was a boy's name. Anyway, he stays over. The family give him the older sister's bed, meaning that the sisters had to share a bed for a few days, making the older sister kinda mad at the boy because of that. The boy was polite, but a sorta weird kid. Not to be rude, they accepted his Facebook friend request and just kinda barely communicated at all for about 10 years or so. 14 years later, the older sister still thinks I'm weird, and yes, she's still kinda mad I slept in her bed back then, so to make up for it, I offered to share mine with her for the rest of my life. She said yes. One of my roommates applied at a bunch of restaurants in New York City after we moved there, got a job at a fancy place, and introduced me and our other roommate to the girls who worked there. From those girls' group of friends, both of us found our future wives. My dad was supposed to move from LA to Portland. On his drive up Mountain Street, Helen's Blue, the ash was so heavy getting into Portland he decided to keep going and settled in Seattle. 4 years later, he met my mom at work and they had me a year later. I'd say watching Mark Kreller's YouTube videos back in like 2011. He's an illustrator who makes drawing tutorials. Although I always liked drawing art, that helped 11-year-old me really get into it. I became more passionate about making art. I took art courses throughout school, applied to a design bay, just graduated with a degree in communication design, and I'm now pursuing designing for film. I'm not 100% sure what to pinpoint for the foundation of my passion, but if I had to, it would be those videos. I feel like without them, I would have been lost in those school years deciding what I wanted to be and what I wanted to pursue. I have told this story before. Many moons ago, I decided to join the military because it sounded better than selling Vicodin to pay my rent, and because I lived in the kind of town where selling Vicodin was the most prestigious work opportunity available. So, I walked my happy ass across town to the Armed Forces Recruitment Center, conveniently located in a dying strip mall. I had my heart set on the Air Force because technology, but the ASDUC office was closed when I arrived. Somewhere around 2. The office as a whole was open today. I learned 5. So I was a little baffled as I stood there, scanning the door for a stepped out, back soon sign or something. The door across the hall opened. A sailor squinted at me. A dumpy, exhausted 19-year-old girl in 2 big pants and a too small shirt, and jerked his chin at the ASDUC door. They left hours ago for an early lunch. I doubt they'll be back today. Want some water? 15 years later, I'm across the country, working a job I love, with a partner of 10 years that I met on my first ship. Some gnarly CPTSD, a lifetime of back problems, and a deep and abiding love of weird problem solving. Had that airman not taken an ASDUC lunch that day, I would have ended up somewhere far different, and without the love of my life. Maybe should have read something into that several hours long lunch, though. When I was 13, my uncle called our house asking if me or my brothers wanted a job for a night at the restaurant he worked at, as a dishwasher had called off. My brothers weren't home, so I said I would do it. The chef liked me and hired me. Over the next 10 years I would meet my now best friend, then meet his younger cousin, who would then introduce me to my now wife of 8 years. So, thanks to that random guy for calling off work, I guess. I checked a box, applying to grad school in the US, and one program had international collaborations you could apply to at no extra cost or effort. Didn't have a passport, but figured why not. Then I landed an interview and got in. Since then, I've had a blast traveling, met and married an awesome lady, and now have a bilingual kid. Checking that box worked out pretty well. I was seeing someone that I already knew that it wasn't going to work out with. It was a newer relationship, so no emotional ties or strong bonds. I had told him that I wanted a break to think some things through. That night I responded to a message on a website even through the profile. Didn't have a face shot. I don't know why, but everything in me was screaming that I needed to message him. We got together the next evening for drinks. The minute I hugged him I knew I had found him. The one. We are twin flames, which I honestly thought was cheesy and not even a real thing, but it is. 3.5 years later, and we are even more in love every day. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.